Sup, guys? 1-2 yesterday. Not exactly what I wanted. And that one was the one that I said I wasn't going to play, which was the under in the Reds-Dodgers game. I said it was dependent on Yamamoto. It continued to seem like he was actually the listed starter, so I played the under and it won, but he wound up not playing. I don't know what exactly it was that they pushed his start back to today. So I don't think he's actually injured because he's playing tonight, but I don't entirely get it. Whatever. I'll take the accidental win on that because it would have been 0-2 otherwise with a one-run loss on the Cubs and then Denver Nuggets. I mean, what can you even say? Congratulations to the Minnesota Timberwolves, I guess. Denver Nuggets, I mean, that was a good spot to play them. They had the upper hand in that game. They were winning by double digits going into the half. They had a 20-point lead early in the third quarter. Blew the whole thing. Oh, I think it's on my TV over there right now. They're talking about it on ESPN. It was the largest comeback in a game 7 in the last 25 years or something like that. Minnesota overcoming a 20-point deficit in the second half. Just ridiculous. I don't know exactly what to think about that. We'll see what happens with the conference finals now set up. As also congratulations to the Indiana Pacers. Really just brutal for the Knicks to go out that way, though. The Pacers will wind up playing my Celtics now. Hopefully the Celtics will be able to get through that for me. The Knicks, I think Jalen Brunson injured his hand just to really just add injury on top of injury, I guess, with so many players already injured. I think he wrecked his hand in yesterday's game, and Indiana shot just an absolutely absurd percentage in the game. It was like, even though the Knicks were outpossessing them, had more possessions, more field goal attempts, way more free throws, the Pacers were shooting such an outlier, like fluke percentage, that they were still winning the game by double digits at the half, and the Knicks made a run, looked like they were going to potentially get back into the game and maybe be able to do something, but I think they were just running too thin, getting too tired. But the Pacers in the first half, I think, were like over 70% from the field and 67% from three-point range. That just doesn't happen, man, ever. Like, that is such a fluke. Don't expect that to happen again. Expect some regression. We'll see where I go with tomorrow's game or games there. But, yeah. Moving on to the NHL, we have one game tonight, which is Game 7, I believe, between Edmonton and Vancouver. Series shifts back to Vancouver. In Game 7s, my tendency would be to look towards an under. I don't really do hockey totals often at all, but you tend to get intense defense, just like in the NBA. So I think the under might be something that makes sense in this game. You're seeing a 5.5, which was juiced to the over, but now it's a little bit less heavily juiced to the over on the total, with 67% of the tickets on the over, because, of course, the public is going to come in and play the over in an Edmonton game. I mean, they score a lot. Neither of these teams, I don't think, are particularly great, like, defensively or on the goaltending end either. We do see 70% of the cash on the over as well, which is interesting, I guess, kind of confuses me. As far as the side is concerned, I would only look to take the Edmonton side, but you're laying a bit of a price here. Edmonton, they've been the favorite throughout the series, man. I keep saying that the books are telling you they're the better of these two teams, to the point where they're a favorite in all the road games. At this point, they're a pretty heavy favorite this time. They're up from minus 145 to minus 157. So this is probably the heaviest favorite number that we've seen on Edmonton in the series. I think in the other road games, they're probably in the 140s or something like that. Minus 157. It's gotten a bit out of control. They're not that public, though. Only 58% of the tickets on them, but 72% of the cash. So I think we do see legitimate money coming in on the Edmonton side. And I agree with it, but I don't know if I want to really lay that price with it. I don't know if there are maybe some other ways that you could look to play Edmonton, like maybe playing their team total over or something along those lines. I think that they will win tonight and win the series, but you never really know, obviously. But that's my lean in that one. And Major League Baseball. We actually have a larger baseball card than I expected on a Monday. Usually, a lot of times you get a shorter card. There were some things that I was looking at. I was potentially leaning to the Minnesota Twins side. They do have Looks like the money line has actually dropped on them a bit. They're a fairly heavy road favorite. It looks like they do have a large percentage of the cash, though, compared to the amount of tickets that are on them. I was looking that way because Washington really used a lot of their bullpen yesterday. Minnesota did not, and Washington is returning home from a road trip. So as far as the situational spots are concerned and the bullpen rest edge, that all is really lining up against Washington in this one. So I think Minnesota does have a pretty big bullpen edge in this one, and they have a good starting pitcher on the mound, Pablo Lopez. So I was like, I'm going to look to play Minnesota here. However, Pablo Lopez actually has bad stats in his career against these Washington hitters. They hit over 300 against him. And Mitchell Parker is pitching for Washington. He's a young guy, and he's been pitching pretty well so far this season. And Minnesota has never seen him before. So I kind of expect Parker to have a decent outing in this one. So that gives me a bit of hesitation on that one. If you're playing Minnesota, it would definitely be a full game type of play because you want the bullpens to be included in that one and the entire situation with Washington returning home from a road trip, whereas Minnesota is still looking for their first win on this road trip that they're on after getting swept by Cleveland. So Minnesota would be the situational play there. Excuse me, not my actual play there. Let's see, what else do we have here? So I was potentially looking to that one, and it looks like there is some market agreement with me on the St. Louis Cardinals as well, with Baltimore being very public as a road underdog. But it looks like, again, this is one where the market has actually moved the money line, just like with Minnesota, has actually moved against St. Louis here, even though it looks like the cash discrepancy is actually still on their side. It looks like the public is much more heavy on Baltimore than the amount of cash is. So it seems like that means some of the bigger money's coming in on the St. Louis side, even though we've seen the market, the money line move against it. But of course, those percentages are, I believe, taking into account bets at any line that it's ever been at. So I don't know, but Baltimore, they're not in the greatest spot either, coming off another series win there, or a series win over the Mariners. They're starting a road trip, though, so that actually is not the worst spot. Usually you are focused when you start a road trip, so that's not horrible for Baltimore. St. Louis is coming off kind of an ugly loss yesterday to the Red Sox. I don't think either team really used that much of their bullpen yesterday, really. Well, I think actually, let me see. St. Louis, I think, actually used 4 of their relievers, or Baltimore only used 2, so actually St. Louis is at a disadvantage there. But I do think St. Louis has a bit of the starting pitcher advantage in that one with Sonny Gray. I think he has pretty decent stats against Baltimore, against Dean Creamer, who I still don't trust him. Like I've been saying, I think he's going to regress at some point based on his career stats. He's pitched well this year so far, but I still expect regression out of him, and his stats against St. Louis are mediocre, I would say, kind of at best. Oh, all right. Anyway, the game that I'm actually going to be on, though, what game am I actually on? I forget what game I'm even on. What did I play? Oh, yes. I think this is a nice mismatch here, and we're getting a nice bullpen edge in this one. So it's a full game play, my only play today, and it is going to be on the Detroit Tigers. I like this one, actually, against the Kansas City Royals. I think I played this one at plus 100. You can get it at the nice even money line underdog here. Looking at the market in this one, the market looks to be in agreement with this. Kansas City, actually, you might be able to get better than plus 100 right now. Actually, I'll have to look, see what did I actually play. It was somewhere in that realm. Kansas City looks like they've dropped from minus 115 to minus 112 on the money line with 81% of the tickets on them. So they're going to be public. I mean, the way that they've been playing so far this season, they have the better record. The public probably even likes actually the starting pitching matchup in this one to some extent too, even though I think Olsen for Detroit probably has the better numbers this season as well. But the public is probably still going to want Kansas City with the better record, and knowing Waka and seeing that his numbers aren't bad this year either. Or actually, they are pretty bad. Actually, they're worse than I thought. Never mind. So I don't know what the public is thinking, to be honest. Never mind. But the public is still on Kansas City. 81% of the tickets on them, but only 68% of the cash. So it looks like we see less of the cash than the tickets coming in on Kansas City, which is something I like. You see the cash disparity going in the other direction, even though Kansas City is public, and we've seen the line move against them a little bit, so some reverse line movement there. And, of course, I agree with it. Kansas City, they're in one of the worst spots out of many of these teams, I would say. They're coming off a sweep of the Oakland A's, but I mean, it's the Oakland A's. Like, does that really matter that much? I don't really think so. Kansas City's staying at home, so I don't know if maybe they're basking in that sweep. I don't know, because sweeping the A's isn't really that impressive. But Kansas City's record looks more impressive now after that. But I mean, come on, like I said, sweeping the A's, who cares? Kansas City used 3 of their relief pitchers yesterday, and now they got Detroit to contend with. Detroit coming in off a loss to the Arizona Diamondbacks yesterday. So Detroit is traveling, but it's only from Arizona to Kansas City, continuing the road trip and coming off a loss. So I think maybe that loss will have them refocused a little bit after they won the other 2 games against Arizona easily. So they played well in the series, won the series. Maybe they ran into a bit of a distracted spot yesterday with Arizona trying to avoid the sweep. Detroit maybe thinking they had the upper hand there, and maybe looking ahead to this game a little bit, a big divisional matchup against Kansas City, which I think might even mean more to Detroit because they're behind Kansas City in the standings. And looking at Detroit's game yesterday against the Arizona Diamondbacks, Detroit did not use much of their bullpen. They used less of their bullpen than Kansas City did because Detroit basically saved the rest of their pen because they used Faedo for 2 innings, which I think he's the guy who's in and out of the starting rotation. So other than him, Detroit only used 1 other relief pitcher. So I think Detroit's bullpen is in a bit of the better shape out of these 2. And then we look at the starting pitching matchup, which I, of course, think Detroit has the edge in the starting pitching matchup. But you got to think, like, if you're the recreational bettors, I'm surprised the recreational bettors are coming in on the Kansas City side to the extent that they are, because Reese Olson, I mean, there's nothing to hate about his numbers this year other than the fact that he gets no run support behind him thanks to Detroit's offense. So, yes, I do have to – with this play, you do have to rely on Detroit's offense at least scoring some for you. But I think based on the starting pitching matchup, I think that should happen. Olson has yet to get a win. He's 0-4. And that means his run support has been horrific because his stats are really good so far this year. 2.09 ERA and .99 whip. He's a young guy, only in his second season, 24 years old. And last season put up pretty good stats with a 1.12 whip and a 3.99 ERA. So I think what we're seeing out of him this year, I don't think it's crazy to think that maybe it's only going to regress slightly and he'll continue to pitch this way. He has a bit fewer than 9 strikeouts per 9 innings. Last year he had almost 9 per 9. So he's not the greatest strikeout guy, but his strikeout walk numbers remain decent. I mean, he has 41 strikeouts this year and 15 walks. The number of walks is not great, but it's not that high either. And the number of hits that he's allowed is very low, with 32 hits allowed in 47 to third innings, and he has not allowed a home run this season. So he's keeping the ball in the park. It looks like he is pretty difficult to hit. So he's been pretty difficult to touch. He does have 1 start so far against Kansas City this season. It was pretty good with 8 strikeouts, 3 walks, which isn't great, but only 3 hits allowed and 1 run allowed in a 7-inning performance. It does mean Kansas City has seen him fairly recently, though. So that's maybe a slight bit of a disadvantage there. But other than that, I mean, Olson has been pitching pretty well this season, man. And he's done it against some good offenses and some bad offenses. But yeah, overall this season, I just gave the rest of those numbers there. So he's been pitching pretty well. And you look at his career numbers against Kansas City, even including facing them this year. Kansas City, we have a decent sample size to look at here. And Kansas City's hitters are only 10 for 51 off in lifetime, with 1 triple, 2 home runs, an 18-6 strikeout walk ratio. That's a 196 batting average and 634 OPS. So very low batting average. Reese Olson, like I said, based on his overall stats, it's difficult to get hits off of him, and it's been the same for Kansas City's lineup. They have found it difficult to hit him. I mean, they have drawn some walks against him and hit a couple of homers off him, so the OPS isn't as low, but it's still like a mediocre at best OPS against him. So Olson's stats are good against Kansas City. Meanwhile, you have an aging Michael Wacha, who's 8 years older than Olson. His record looks better because he's 3-4 this season, but he's had a lot more run support behind him, obviously, because his ERA is 4.71 with a 1.37 whip. There's nothing to really love about that, man. I mean, this is his first season with Kansas City. He's been in the league for over a decade at this point. And I mean, his career stats are pretty decent. He's had some clunker seasons in there. And then when he came over to the AL, he actually had a couple of decent seasons with Well, actually, he had one decent season with Boston, really. I don't know how Boston was able to turn him around. And then really his only other good season, like you have to go back to like 2018 to actually find a good season out of him with St. Louis, aside from the Boston season where maybe they figured out something about his mechanics. I don't know, because Boston's Fenway is not really a pitcher's park by any means. But then after that, he had good numbers last year pitching in San Diego. But I mean, San Diego is a very pitcher-friendly park. So I don't know if that skewed his stats a bit last season. He's never been a great strikeout pitcher, averaging well below 9 strikeouts per 9 innings. Career whip is 1.29, which is still a bit high and similar to what he's been posting this year at the 1.37 whip. Career ERA 3.99, so close to 4. And over the last several seasons, it's gone up a bit. It's been worse, even if you include his good stats over the last 2 seasons. This season, his stats, I mean, like I said, based on his ERA and whip, you can kind of determine what they are. They're mediocre, really. Not a great strikeout rate, 44 and 49 and 2/3. Not horrible, but he's allowed 51 hits in that many innings, which is too many hits allowed. He's allowed 5 home runs, which isn't that great, and he's walked 17, so that walk number is a bit high as well. So Olson's stats are just better across the board, really. And if you're worried about Olson having been seen once by Kansas City already, well, Walker's been seen by Detroit already this season too, and he didn't have a great performance. He got hit around and gave up 9 hits in that game, 2 home runs, 4 earned runs. So you might figure, well, maybe he'll bounce back. I don't know, because he's also coming off 2 pretty good starts in a row against the LA Angels, and Seattle. Seattle, a decent team, where Walker's strikeout numbers kind of went up in those. He had decent strikeout numbers in those, but Angels, bad offense, really. And he still walked 5 guys in that one. And that was his only start where he threw over 100 pitches. And now he's coming off a good start over Seattle. But, I mean, facing these Detroit hitters, this is where it comes in, man. You look at Olson's stats against Kansas City, they're quite good. Walker, on the other hand, against Detroit, not great. And he's faced them quite a bit because I think even when he was back in the National League, I think he still faced them a decent amount. I don't even know, but whatever the case may be, he's faced Detroit a decent amount there. And Detroit is 23 for 72 off in lifetime. So we have a decent sample size here. 4 doubles, 4 home runs. He does have a 17-4 strikeout walk ratio against them, so that's pretty good. But the rest of the stats are pretty bad, man. A 319 batting average allowed against them and 897 OPS. So we're looking at Walker being the older pitcher, the pitcher that has significantly worse numbers basically across the board this season and worse numbers against the opposing hitters he's about to face than what Olson has this season. Olson with the better overall numbers this season and against these opposing hitters, these Kansas City hitters. So that's the only play for me today. The Detroit Tigers at whatever price you can get them at. You're getting them at somewhat of an underdog price here. If Action Network would let me in here, I could actually see what can we do here. Plus 100, I think, is still the best you can do on them. So that's going to do it for me, man. Let's have a winning day. Let's go 1-0. Come on. Start off the week right. Peace.